2022. And also welcome to the January 20th, 2022 California Board of Accountancy Strategic Planning Workshop. This is a continuation from the November 19th, 2021 workshop. My name is Michael Savoy, and I am president of the California Board of Accountancy. At this time, I will turn it over to Ms. Reed to please take a roll call and establish a quorum. When Ms. Reed calls your name, please unmute your microphone, state your name, and please remember to mute your microphone once you have stated your name. Ms. Reed?
This is the moderator. I apologize for interrupting. I paused the recording, so I was going to restart the recording and let you know that a loud announcement will be made. And also, I did promote Ariel Pay. If we can do a quick mic check and video check with him.
Check 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. And now, I can see your video feed. Thank you. So now I'm going to hit the record button. It'll make an announcement. I'll turn it back to the board.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, Ms. Reed, please establish a quorum by doing a roll call.
Nancy Corrigan.
Present.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Present.
Dan Jacobson.
Here.
Sochi Leon.
Sochi Leon, present.
Dee Dee Owens. Ariel Pay.
Hey.
Deirdre Robinson.
Deirdre Robinson, present.
Katrina Salazar.
Here.
Michael Savoy.
Michael Savoy, present.
Mark Silverman. Yin Tu. Yin Tu. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. I would like to thank the solid team for conducting the strategic planning workshop. The CBA's mission is protect consumers by ensuring only qualified licensees practice public accountancy in accordance with established professional standards. This mission is derived from the statutory requirement that protection of the public shall be the highest priority for the CBA in exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary actions and functions. Whenever the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. Before we convene, please be advised that the meeting is being conducted pursuant to provisions of Government Code 11133, which allows the CBA to continue to conduct meetings via teleconference through January 31st, 2022. At this time, I would like to turn the meeting over to Elizabeth Cornell, the Strategic Planning Business Analyst, and Ann Fisher, Facilitator, to conduct a strategic planning workshop.
Elizabeth Cornell, I would like to make a correction. Here with me, co-facilitating the planning session will be Sarah Irani. Sarah?
Hello, this is Sarah Irani. I'm filling in for Ann today.
Thank you, Sarah. And before we get started, does any member have any questions or comments regarding any of the items that we covered in the November Strategic Planning Workshop? Feel free to raise your hand. I don't see any hands that are up, so shall we continue where we left off, which was laws and regulations? And thank you, Sarah. You displayed the previous slide here as well, laws and regulations. we left off on the objective, hire laws and regulations specialist. Would anyone like to contribute the why or the benefit of hiring a laws and regs specialist? And again, feel free to raise your hand. Dan Jacobson.
In thinking about this, my question simply is, don't we already have that? I mean, isn't that what, amongst many things, people like Patty and Deanne, in fact, are? I posed the question.
Thank you. Any of the board staff would like to respond to Mr. Jacobson's question? Patty, I see your hand is up.
Elizabeth, can you just remind where this was pulled from? I apologize. I was monitoring something on the side. So if you could just go back and remind me where this was pulled from, I think I would be better positioned to respond.
Yes, in the previous strategic planning session conducted in November, I believe this was one of the objectives that was brought up by one of the board members. I may be wrong. No, it was brought up by one of the board members. That's the only way we record the objectives up here.
And that's what, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to misspeak. I think this is already covered, but certainly if this is something members feel they would want to emphasize in the strategic plan, then I certainly wouldn't object to that.
Thank you. And Carrie Ann, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I know that this is a responsibility that is covered under a number of staff members, and I think that they have done an admirable job of it. But like a lot of things, we evolve and we find that what maybe has worked in the past isn't as efficient, or we find that there may be blind spots or areas where we could have expertise. And we have had a number of topics that have become increasingly complex that go beyond just the rules and regulations around accountants, around the practice of accountancy, but there have been a number of issues now that have arisen across multiple jurisdictions that that in which the federal regulations and laws have impact upon the work that accountants do and upon the work that we do as a board. We're looking at, what is happening in other states, and that it takes a lot of work and a lot of specialization to manage, understanding all the complexities of all of those rules and regulations. And so it could be helpful to have someone who it is their responsibility to be a, government affairs, government relations, legislative, to have a legislative expertise that is able to advise the board on, matters, and to, track matters and things like that. That's a reason why I could see it being of value to the board and it being of value to the staff, to the CBA staff. I know that everyone is stretched pretty thin, and the pandemic just sort of made those limitations really exposed a lot of our limitations in a lot of ways, and some of the not shortcomings, I'll say opportunities that we have to improve and advance. So I can see how this could be helpful, to the board.
Thank you. And before we move on to Katrina, I see your hand is up, and then Patty Bowers. I wanted to go back and touch base with Dan Jacobson. Was your question answered, Dan?
It was commented upon. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd just like to layer another comment on, if I could. Just off the top of my head, I would just add to that people like Patrick and, my goodness, Helen. Our lawyer. So far, it seems to me, I understand that people are stretched thin, but so far it seems to me like we have people who have done a pretty bang up job, and it seems like we have this covered. That's just my comment.
Thank you. And we'll move on to Katrina Salazar.
Honestly, when we started this slide, I was at a loss as to where we left off. But in looking through my notes, I believe the source of this is on page 53 of the environmental scan, where there was a reference to some of the weaknesses, and we discuss high turnover rate. And it says the CBA executive management team said rulemaking is a specialized process and recommended a designated expert staff or unit. So I think that's where this came from. So before I kick it back to staff to maybe expand upon that, my question is, if that is indeed sort of where this developed from, is there a way to rather say than to hire a specialist than to maybe leverage the DCA resources in this area? Because I guess my question is, do we need an expert on our staff year round? And is there enough work? So I think it's an important area. I think we shouldn't pigeonhole. We should build flexibility into our strategic objective to expand our capabilities rather than force a direct hire when there may be a more creative solution that staff can identify. Thank you.
Thank you. And Patty, your hand is up.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Katrina. And I just wanted to maybe give a little background that, we are not alone in our work with regard to legislation or regulation. So we do have significant support at the department level. For legislation, they have an entire ledge unit that assists with doing bill analyses, and they can assist with representing before the legislature if we need that type of assistance. We just have to reach out, and they're really available to us. Same with regulations. The department's legal office has a team of attorneys who specialize in regulations. So I think the comment that came from the SWOT analysis was probably very specific to internal activities, and we actually are in the process of resolving that. Some of you will recall years ago, we had actually a specialist who handled all of our regulations in-house. And then that person, with short notice, retired, and we were left in a situation where we didn't really have internal resources qualified and trained to do regulations. So over the past couple of years, we've been very strategic in our internal cross-training to make sure that each of our program areas has at least 2 people on staff who are well-versed in regulations. That's been an ongoing project. Not a real popular one. It's not a real enjoyable thing to do regulations. And so I think that comment may have come more from the idea of, hey, we'd really rather have a specialist doing it than having our staff do it. But operationally, I think the process and the efforts that we've made to cross-train staff in program areas is the right one for the board, because we never want to be back in a place where we only have one person on staff trained to do our regulations and then they leave and we're behind in our workload. And so I think we're well covered on this. So as far as hiring someone specialist on staff, I would agree that part of this suggestion might be too narrow, but certainly the partnering with, local bar associations and the other portion of this suggestion I thought was appropriate.
Thank you. Katrina, you have your hand up?
Thank you. Maybe I think my ask is, rather than leaving this higher action, maybe we could simply be supportive of what Patty has communicated already taking action steps on, and change it to expand rulemaking capacity by recommending and developing designated staff to handle rulemaking. So maybe just try to reiterate and be supportive of that, so that it becomes part of the staff strategic objectives.
Thank you, Katrina. And if you can please repeat that a little bit slower for Sarah to be able to type that up. So on the screen, we have expand rulemaking capacity
by recommending, cross-training, and developing designated staff to handle rulemaking and to advise the board. And I am open to any friendly amendments to improve the wording of that to my peers out there.
Thank you. Any refinements to or amendments to the objective as it's listed on the screen? Please raise your hand. I see no hands up, so we can move on to so far. Oh, sorry, Katrina.
I was just going to say, when I read what's written, I think the word recommending is unnecessary, so I would strike it just to abbreviate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, before we move on, and I request any additional objectives that you may want to add to the goal area of laws and regulations, I would like to look back at what has been created so far. So we have 2 objectives here on this screen. Access, ability to contribute to the national conversation about deregulation to improve consumer protection. The second one here is examine continuing education and education requirements to be more current and adaptable to help improve the process for licensees and to help licensees stay on track to assist in the enforcement workload. The third one here was an action item, which was create laws and regulations training opportunities for board members and staff. And then the 2 objectives that we have on the second slide here. So we have a total of 4 objectives. Now, would anyone like to add any additional objectives before we look over and finalize or final the draft of the objectives that we have up here? So currently requesting for any additional objectives that anyone would like to add, or any of the board members. Feel free to raise your hand. Okay, I see no raised hands for additional objectives. So let's go back to the first slide and make sure that the previous slide, thank you. Make sure that there's no refinements to each of these objectives. So the first one, any refinements or questions for the objective? Assess ability to contribute to the national conversation. Yes, Dan Jacobs. Oh, is your hand up? No. You're on mute, Dan.
Sorry, if you see me doing this, blame it on Dr. Nathan in Long Beach.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, thank you. And Dee Dee Owens, you have your hand up.
To the word assess, right? So are we assessing our ability to contribute to the national conversation, or are we going, or is it more of an action word, participate in the national conversation? I can't remember why we use the word assess.
Thank you. Would anyone Would anyone like to respond to Dee Dee's question? So whether it should be assess or an action, more actionable word like participate. And Deidre, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Dee Dee on that. I think the word assess appears to question our ability to assess rather than to initiate an action of participation. So I would agree that perhaps participate would be a better appropriate word in that arena.
Thank you. So we will. If anyone else has any response to that, we will change the word assess to participate. We may have to refine the issue here. And Dan, I see your hand is up.
Well, perhaps it should simply be contribute as the action, and then the remainder of the of what was written under issue as the issue. Contribute to the national conversation about deregulation.
Thank you. Any preference over the participate or the contribute? Does the contribute work as well? Yes, Dee Dee.
I'm fine with that too. I mean, I think it just gives the right action instead of just assess. It means we're going to do something, so I'm fine with it.
Okay, so we will leave the term contribute. Anyone else? Any comments? Okay. And if I lower your hand, it might be because I think you left it over from the previous question, but if you do have an additional question, please raise your hand again. So moving on to the next objective, examine continuing education and education requirements. Thank you. To be more current and adaptable to help improve the process for licensees and to help licensees stay on track and to assist in the enforcement workload. Any refinements, amendments to this objective? No? Okay, we'll move on to the third objective on the next slide. Partner with local bar associations to educate attorney about accountancy and educate accountancy about attorneys. Any refinements or amendments to this objective? Feel free to raise your hand. Katrina, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I want to ask if anybody on this call recalls quite what the education would be about, only because it's very broad. So that would maybe be my question.
Dan, your hand is up. And Dan, I see your hand is up. Would you like to respond to Katrina's question, or do you have a comment?
I think I was called on without going like this. I think I asked that this be put up for a couple of reasons. One, I think a lot of attorneys don't know the great importance of accountants in taking care of their clients. I think there's a dearth of education amongst attorneys about what accountants do. And so I think it's very helpful to attorneys and to accountants to know that, and most important, to the public to know that. It was only about 20, 25 years ago that I understood it. And also it's important to know, for accountants to know what attorneys do for their for their clients. So as part of partnering with local bar associations, if y'all can get, if they can all get together and in non-pandemic times, perhaps have a seminar on these things that maybe will help with continuing education on both their parts. I think it would be helpful. Quite frankly, also, attorneys need to hire accountants, and it's probably a good idea to get them together so that they need to hire them as experts. And so it's probably a good idea for them to get together so that the attorneys know accountants that they think are good and can hire them. But the whole idea is to mesh, is to put the two together to understand what the differences and there's a tiny bit of overlap, what that is, and understand each other. So understand what they're all doing for their often mutual clients.
Thank you, Dan. Katrina, your hand is up.
So, and this might be a question for staff. Thank you, Dan, so much for that reminder. I apologize. November seems so far away, I have to admit. So my reaction to that is I have two thoughts. One, would it be appropriate to expand it to maybe bring in the state association? Because I would wonder if our state society is already engaging in those kind of things. So maybe that would be a way for us not to reinvent the wheel, but be supportive of things that may already be identified by some of our groups that we already work with. And then second, would you consider this to be more of an outreach category item than laws and regs? I think the placement here in laws and regs was what threw me off. So that is those are my two requests. Can we expand it to include our state society if appropriate, if staff think that makes sense? And then could we consider its placement? Thank you.
Anyone from the staff would like to respond, or Patty? Thank you. Your hand is up. Thank you, Patty. Your hand is up.
Both excellent suggestions on Ms. Salazar's part.
And I'm sorry, this is Nancy Corrigan. My hand raise function does not seem to be working. We'll test it at the break. But I just wonder whether we want to limit this to, I understand all about attorneys, local bar association, et cetera. Are there other professions, investment advisors? Are there others that we should be considering? I mean, many groups of professionals don't necessarily understand the relationship between a client, an accountant, et cetera. Do we want to limit ourselves to attorneys? Do we want to expand that? It's just a thought.
Thank you. Katrina, do you have another comment? I see your hand is up.
Sorry, no, but Nancy, I think that's a fantastic idea, broadening it.
And again, I apologize. And I don't know how we capture all of the body, all of the professionals, unless we want to just make more of a generic reference to them and then further identify them, in the details. But and I certainly don't have a list of them at hand. But it might be a good idea not to restrict ourselves to just the attorneys and to think about, the other groups that may be pertinent here. Thank you again.
And Dan, I see your hand is up.
As to something that Nancy brought up is that the I mean, I'm a longtime member of the Orange County Bar Association, and this stuff does not go on, and that's the third largest county in population wise in the state. So that's one thing. As to the other professionals, I agree. However, I think that sticking with these two professionals for this year gets our toe in the water and is more manageable than just saying all these professions that might be. It might be the other professions may be a better topic for next year.
Thank you. And Deidre, I see your hand is up.
In listening to the dialogue regarding the introduction of other professions, I greatly appreciate the contributors. But I must say, in the role of strategic planning, it does require some forethought ahead of time. So perhaps we can talk about using one of the professions as a template for the introduction to others, which may be, I don't want to speak for Dan, maybe what he was concerned about, being spreading ourselves too thin. But I certainly suggest that we do develop that list and begin the forethought of thinking about what those other professions may be, and how we can be a greater participant in the discussions and the outcomes for the citizens for the state of California.
I saw Nancy's hand was up from the video. Was that correct or no?
I'm clear now. Thank you.
Thank you. I now see Patty. Your hand is up.
I did just want to comment to Ms. Robinson's suggestion, and I think that came up at the last strategic plan meeting as well, and we actually have begun developing that list. It's quite long, so we didn't distribute it today, and we're still working on finalizing it, but we are starting to put that list together.
Thank you. I see Katrina, your hand is up, and then Dee Dee.
I appreciate all the comments. So revising the second line, what I would request is that we say partner with the California State Society and local bar associations to educate about the accountancy profession in order to improve or enhance consumer protections, because ultimately that's really our So I don't know, Dan, since this is your inspired by your comment, if that seems reflective of what you're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. And Dan, does the second objective, can we remove the first objective? Does the second refined wording objective address the concern?
I think it does I think it does very well.
Thank you. And I believe it was going to be moved to outreach, correct? Yes. Okay, and we can always, in parentheses, we can put outreach, or we can move it now. I did see another hand. I apologize, I didn't call on it right away. Please feel free to raise your hand.
Covered, I was going to mention moving it to outreach, so you covered that, and I was also going to mention partnering with the California State Society, so I think I'm good.
Thank you. Okay, I think there's no more refinements. Please feel free to raise your hand if you do have any for that objective. And moving on to the last objective here is the one that was just refined and created, expand rulemaking capacity by cross-training and developing designated staff to handle rulemaking and advise the board. Any refinements, amendments to that? No? Okay, so that we have 4 objectives for the area of laws and regulations. And board president, would you like to open for public comment? Okay, I have now opened the Q&A. Members of the public, if you would like to participate in public comment about the laws and regulations goal area objectives that were just drafted, please click on the question mark inside of a square, which is typically located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. And in the text field, type, I would like to make a comment, and click send, making sure that it sends to all panelists. The instructions are on your screen for your reference. Board President, no requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to move it, the facilitation to Sarah Irani. She will cover the next goal area. Sarah?
Hello. I've passed over presenter role to Elle, so she'll get that PowerPoint back up in just a moment. All right. So our next goal area is emerging technologies. And if you need to review the environmental scan, the summary for that will be on pages 61 through 62. And then the recommended recommended objectives on page 69. I'll give you a brief moment to kind of look that back over and refresh yourselves. All right. Hopefully that was enough time to kind of look over the environmental scan again. If not, I'll try to keep an eye out for raised hands or videos. But we can move on to our next slide and start creating objectives. It looks like we have the start of one here, which is continue to explore ways to automate licensing. Do we have a benefit or why for this objective? Not seeing any raised hands or, oh, I see hand raised from Nancy.
Suppose what we could say here is to improve efficiency for newly licensed candidates and license renewals.
All right. And I also see a hand raised from Dee Dee Owens.
Sorry, it's just the kind of the continued thing around exploring something. And as I was looking at the recommendations, and I think we also have something on our agenda for tomorrow around the modernization efforts. I mean, is it too aggressive to put something around, implement automation of licensing? Or is that am I being overly aggressive in what we think we can accomplish within the span of this strategy?
All right. And I also see a hand raised from Katrina.
I'm back to needing a refresher on where we left this topic in November. When I see automating licensing, I think that's very narrow. And my recollection was this was maybe more about leveraging technologies to improve efficiency. So I think that's my question for my fellow board members is, were we really intending to be so specific in automation? Because I guess I'm not sure what automate means. It could vary as the technology changes. So that's really just an ask for the folks as to, thoughts on broadening it to give staff a little bit more leeway to implement the objective.
Okay. So Elle has typed up leveraging technological changes to improve efficiency for newly licensed candidates. I see a couple hands raised. I think I saw Dee Dee Owens' hand first.
I can't recall. I mean, you're right about November being so far away. I can't recall exactly, but I think we had a lot of conversation around the use of technology and conversations around, just different reports having to be merged together and the complexity around that. So using technology, integrating processes, modernizing certain processes so staff doesn't have to spend the time trying to reconcile everything, for reporting to us and then reporting to the community at large. I remember some of those conversations, and that links to what's in the strategic planning workshop materials, if that helps kind of, trigger memories as well.
All right. And then I believe Nancy Corrigan also had a comment.
Yes, thank you. And Ms. Owens, that was very, very helpful and what I recalled as well. And maybe we need to know, I know staff continually report to us as to where they are. Some has been accomplished, but there is a way to go. So I think being more specific, referring to technology so that it envelops maybe that whole process. There's a lot to it, licensing a candidate and me renewing my license. So I think we're kind of getting there and approaching it. And if we can just fine tune it here is all I wanted to say.
All right. And I have a hand raised from Yen too.
You. I agree with what's being said here, especially the leveraging the technology. When we talk about licensing and renewal and so forth, it's payment and all kinds of different payment encompassing in that licensing as well as renewing license. I would imagine if there's any penalty when they have to pay, that should involve advancing technology too. I just want to clarify if that includes payment as well. When I do talk to a lot of CPA, some of the comment I do hear is like, oh my God, I still have to send checks these days, or whatever the case may be. And I just want to make sure we include that.
Perhaps maybe to improve efficiency for efficiency and payments. And then I also have a hand raised from Katrina.
My comment is, when I read this, it's unclear as to whether or not we're trying to reduce the staff side. So I think the question I have is, would it be appropriate to expand the leveraging technological changes and add to minimize staff's manual processing steps? Because that seems to be at the heart of what we're doing. When I think about this, I want staff not to be doing a lot of labor intensive moving of data through the system, but I want them to be doing those things that require critical thinking, and does it make sense, and should this license be renewed, and are all the pieces, do they comply, rather than someone retyping a name from one system to another one. So is that for staff comment, is that reflective of what, from your perspective, would be beneficial? And does minimizing staff's manual processing steps add value from your perspective?
I think Patty Bowers has comment to that.
Katrina, I think much of what you're describing in this section is actually our business modernization project that's ongoing. And I think if you wanted to reference the continued support of that project, and this is a 3-year plan, and so that project will span over several years, but I think that's okay. And so I think we could make this more about the business modernization project, which again is just all encompassing of the conversation so far, including, I think Ms. Tu had the comment about the payment processing, which will be part of that endeavor as well.
Thank you.
All right, I see a hand raised from Deidre.
Hi, this is Deirdre. I'm just referencing page 62, the last item, number 5 on that page, as it pertains to emerging technology weaknesses, in the fact that the CBA executive and management team both commented on the fact that there is a lack of IT staff. And I'm wondering if there is a way to incorporate the need for having the appropriate increase in staffing in one area to decrease workload in another, and should that be addressed at this time?
All right, I also see a hand raised from Patty Bowers.
Thank you. Not to persuade, I don't want to persuade what the board includes in its strategic plan, and so I want to be sensitive to that. But I will share that the likelihood of us, the size of the board that we are, expanding our IT resources might be difficult. We have for a board our size, a pretty healthy IT unit. we're unique. A lot of the boards don't have an IT unit on staff. But at the Department of Consumer Affairs, they do have a very large IT program that provides support out to the boards and bureaus. And we are in the process of internally identifying those types of IT services that could be handled more effectively by the department's IT unit, and retaining those functions within our IT staff that are really necessary to have on site. And so we're in the process of doing that. That's something that could be incorporated into this plan, but I just wanted to make sure that members are aware of that exercise that we're in the process internally of doing.
All right, and I also see a hand raised from Nancy Corrigan.
That, Ms. Bowers, because that was a question and something that I know I wanted to hear from staff as to what your own perception of what your needs are. It's very helpful, I think, in helping us to make decisions. The other thought I had is I don't know if I want on our list here to refer specifically to payments. I mean, it's a lot of paperwork is being moved around by staff, and certainly we want to become efficient and minimize that, become electronic, whatever, but also because that improves our turnaround time for candidates. I believe quite a few of the payments, you know, I mean, I renew and I use my credit card online. So I think some of this already has been accomplished, and I hate to just highlight payment when there's so much more than payment. There's a lot of information going back and forth in addition to making some payments. So, you know, maybe we need, and I kind of said before, maybe we need to know, some of this has been accomplished, Ms. Bowers, isn't that correct?
Yes, that is correct. As part of our business modernization plan, we're piloting small areas internally that we need to automate. Right now, well, recently, we've done the renewal automation. Recently, we automated the application process for obtaining a CPA license, and part of our current pilot that we're working on will include a continuing education option for renewing online so that their continuing education can be submitted as well. And we're also working on online complaint form, interactive complaint form. And so those are part of, which you'll hear a little bit more about at the meeting tomorrow, but those are part of our current business modernization project.
All right, I see another hand raised from Katrina.
Thank you for those comments. Nancy, since payment processing is removed, I would request that we replace it with stakeholder experience. And as Patty has mentioned, you know, these are really great points. And I think, as I remember back to November, we talked about the CBA team developing action points underneath it. So I think all of those things that Patty referenced and those details maybe don't necessarily need to be specifically identified in here because they can create those action items. But anyways, that's my friendly amendment, is to reference the stakeholder experience. And I think that might be a more global change.
All right. So Elle has typed up that last one, continue to support the business modernization project to improve staff efficiency and stakeholder experience. Do we still need the top 2 objectives that we have written here? Or do we think that that last one kind of covers both of them? See a hand raised from Dee Owens.
Does encapsulate what we're trying to communicate and move forward with the focus on the business modernization project. So my recommendation would be to remove the ones above and have this one as our comprehensive.
Any objections to removing those 2? I see no hands raised or frantic waving in the camera, so go ahead and remove those two. All right, and I see a hand raised from Katrina.
There was one item in the environmental scan that caught my attention. So before it gets written down, I would maybe ask staff or ask Patty for some input on it. But there was an objective, a summary of recommended objective that identifies developing a multi-year technology plan to focus on both internal and external technology solutions. So my question is, Patty, I interpret that to mean sort of an evergreen plan for the team to continue to look for not just what's been identified as part of business mod, but other solutions as they come up. Does that make sense to you? Do you have any comments about where that might have originated?
Yeah, we're actually in partnership with the department's IT unit. We're developing that plan really from a succession planning, if you will, as our IT staff move on for other opportunities or those positions vacate for whatever reason. We know that there would be a loss of knowledge internally. And so part of that plan will be making sure that between our IT staff and the department, the board's fully covered should we have any losses on staff, as well as just increased security. Right now, a lot of our security is handled in-house. And as you heard last year from our military audit, we did very well. And so we're very proud of that. But we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of additional security options that the department would have at their disposal. And so this plan it'll be a documented plan. I think we have targeted to roll portions of it out in this summer and into next year. And so I think putting this in, again, the strategic plan covers a 3-year period typically. And so I think it would be fine to include it in this strategic plan. So Katrina, I don't know if that answered your question, but I guess where I think some of these comments are coming from are likely internal activities that we're working on. And so as we completed the survey providing feedback, I think you're seeing from a staff perspective, a lot of reiteration of things that we're working on internally. I don't know if that answered your question.
It did. Thank you, Patty. That was fabulous. I saw Dan's hand up, so I was thinking he was going to jump in.
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, thank you. So this is on a different subject, but it relates back to something that we spoke about maybe 15 minutes ago, and that's having diversity on the board. And by accident, you got diversity by getting me. Sorry, and I, for a brief period in the early 1980s, was homeless, and this brings to mind that there are people who are in different stages in different stations of life. This may apply more to students than to accountants who have been doing this than to people who are licensed accountants. However, some licensed accountants may hit hard times. So some people may not have access to all the things that we have access to, computers and that sort of thing. This used to not bother me that much because I always thought, well, people can go to their public library. That's not the case in Orange County yet right now. because of Omnicromny or whatever it's called, that they're closed, and at least the county libraries are. And so, with that, and with, I just think that we have to be aware of people's different stages and different stations in life, so that we can serve all stakeholders in order to protect the public. Maybe have, maybe it'll be down. The younger people probably do have access to computers, but some of them may not. Some of them living in zip codes that are less affluent may not. And I just think that we ought to keep this in mind, that we ought to have someone who can take paper and look at paper. Thank you.
All right. Can I ask if Katrina can repeat that objective that she had earlier? And I also see that Nancy's hand was raised, so I'll get to Nancy in just a moment.
All right. Thank you. The action is develop. The issue is a multi-year technology plan that focuses on both internal and external technology solutions to improve security, efficiency, just security and efficiency. That's all I got.
Okay, and then Nancy had a comment.
As a result of Dan, I have 2 comments. So I'll
Okay, go ahead.
I would guess, I don't know, maybe Patty can let us know, that there perhaps is an option. And it doesn't even have to be young people. Some people get an education and they get their CPA later in life. They raise their kids and then they become a CPA. I don't know. But number one, is there an option if I happen to go online, because that's where I'm directed to submit paper? So I guess that's a question. And as a part of this whole process, we're talking about kind of now and going forward, what licensees, candidates, what to do. What about the backlog, handling the backlog of paper documents, the scanning, the whatever it is we're doing? Is there something in place? Is this modernization project handling that backlog of our however many years we have of history? So, and do we perhaps need to add something to our list here? Thank you.
I see hand raised from Patty Bowers.
Hi, thank you, Ms. Corrigan. So with regard to the question about applying online or paper, I suspect that will be how we'll always accept things, online or paper. I don't envision that someday we'll be so deep into technology that we would refuse to accept paper if someone wanted to submit it. My goal, though, would be to provide the option so everything could be online, should that be the preference of the individual, whatever it is they're submitting to us. As far as the backlog or all of our historical documents, that's really not part of the business modernization project that we're working on now. And that really has to do with cost. It would be, and we have assessed the cost to go paperless, and it would be multi-million-dollar project. And so that's something that I think, just because of the cost associated with it, we'll have to really plan ahead to do. But as we begin to automate, slowly we will reduce the amount of paper we add to that backlog. But to go back to the beginning of time when everything was paper, I think that's something financially that's probably not in the very near future for the board.
Thank you, Patty, for your comments.
I see a hand raised from Katrina.
And this is just in response to Dan's comment. Dan, I appreciate that. And I want to try to maybe paraphrase and see if this resonates with you, because I do think the idea is important. I'm not sure it belongs in emerging technologies, again, maybe outreach, but you know, what you've mentioned is important, and there are other groups, there are accessibility issues. So would it be appropriate to recap your comment as saying ensure processes are available to stakeholders considering their accessibility limitations, or you know, with consideration of their accessibility limitations, and that way we're not shoehorned into anything specific, but it gives guidance that we wish to consider that option. Because I know we already offer our website in multiple languages. I was really excited about that. And so I think we should continue to be open to the stakeholders who may need to access information in a way different than you or I.
The answer to your question is yes. That sums up much better. That sums up what I said in a much better way, and then maybe it's to provide stakeholders opportunities to protect the public. Thank you, Katrina.
All right. So Elle has written out this objective and also a comment that maybe this needs to belong in the organizational effectiveness goal area. Look, I'm seeing nodding heads, so probably yes. All right. So she's going to copy that one over.
May I jump in while she's editing that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Dan, this isn't formed in any way, but rather than, I forgot what you said, protection, maybe it's to ensure, you know, to further the goals of diversity and inclusion. I'm thinking back to some of the comments from our earlier conversations today at the committee level, and maybe honing it in on the diversity and inclusion for our stakeholders is more what it's about than protection.
Well, I'll just say, Katrina, first of all, I should run my ideas by you. You translate them to English, and then we put them in. That's much better than what I said.
Teamwork, all inspired by you, Dan. This is all you, really.
All right, and 1 second while we're resolving some technical issues of PowerPoint.
Dan, you're going to have to remember whatever I said, though, because I might forget by the time it comes up on the screen.
All right, we're gonna shift presenters real quick just because it seems like we're having some issues with PowerPoint, and this is kind of why we have two copies. So I'm gonna share my version real quick, and then Elle, I don't know if you want to take over the facilitating portion. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I apologize there for that technology glitch or user glitch here. We finished that. So we were, oh, sorry, no, we finished laws and regulations. We were in emerging technologies. If we can retype, I apologize. Everything is being recorded, so it is in the recording. Unfortunately, I can't access what you all had developed so far. So if you can please repeat the last objective we were on, and I believe that was Katrina.
All I got is the why, which is to enhance diversity and inclusion. And now that you've asked, I've forgotten the first half. Dan, help me out.
Gotcha. It's be aware of the various well, I'd say stations of life of stakeholders in order to understand their availability or unavailability of technological communication devices in order to enhance diversity and inclusion. Okay, Katrina, what did I really say?
I've lost it. Where someone's going to have to pull up the actual webinar screenshot and just drop it in.
But that's good enough for a placeholder. That's the idea.
It is absolutely the idea. I think we just had shortened it.
Thank you. And Soshil, you have your hand up, and afterwards I will ask Board President if we can take a 15-minute break and come back to this goal area. So Soshil, go ahead.
We'll look at the actual records, but I think the spirit was definitely the diversity in the stations of life, but I think it got wider than that, which was accessibility. What I think Katrina made a mention around language, Dan around living situation, and then people with disabilities, right? So taking a more macro view around accessibility of our technology so it's available, usable, effective for this large, diverse community. That's it.
Yep. Board President, shall we go to a break?
My only concern is that we need to finish this entire exercise. My guess is by 12:15. If this completes emerging technologies and the only thing left is organizational effectiveness, then I think we can get that done between 11:30 and 12:15. So yes, 15-minute break, 14 minutes now. Let's please be back at 11:30.
And we're back. Board President.
Let us proceed.
Thank you. And we attempted to recover the file which was not possible, so I apologize for that. But we will check the recording and make sure that we get those objectives exactly how they were drafted. As you know, once you finish today's strategic plan draft, the final draft will be provided to you in the upcoming board meeting for your review, refinements, and approval. So good thing this is not the final draft. So now we were on emerging technologies. So thank you, Sarah, sharing your screen. And the first slide there. Okay, so we have a placeholder. One of the objectives that was developed that was lost here was continuing the participation in the business modernization. And the second objective, and actually this objective about accessibility was one that was being moved to the goal area of organizational effectiveness. So if you want to put a note or if you want to move it for me, please, Sarah. Thank you.
I apologize. We're removing this one here.
Yes. Oh, we're moving it to organizational effectiveness. And you'll see that under organizational effectiveness, I already, Sarah already put the placeholder there. But this provides a little bit more insight, but that's the one we had already, or that you all had already developed for the accessibility. So going back to emerging technologies. This slide there. And Sochi, do you have your hand up or was it from last time? Thank you. Okay, so again, we'll go grab the other. Believe there was another objective, unless you can recall. I can't recall what the other objective was. I know one was a business modernization. Besides those two, do you have any additional objectives that you would like to add to the strategic plan for emerging technologies? And please feel free to raise your hand. No additional objectives. Again, we had the business modernization. I believe we may have had another one there as well. Can't recall that objective at this moment. Deidre Robinson, you have your hand up.
A question for clarification. You moved that last comment to another segment of the strategic plan, and I can understand why. But I'm wondering if that same sentiment would be sprinkled throughout all of the segments of the strategic action plan. It was brought up in the area of emerging technologies because that spawned a thought process that required us to make that consideration. But when we use the word beware of, those kinds of actions are not strong, actionable verbs about what our plan is to do something about it. That's almost like watching a legislation piece being drafted. It's a watch. Will we be stronger in our action and commitment to diversity and inclusion? Or tell me how this process works. I'm asking for clarification regarding that, if that makes sense.
Thank you. And Sarah, if we can take a glance at the organizational effectiveness slide. We did move it. The next one, please. Thank you. We did move it. However, I believe, and please correct me, anyone, if I'm wrong, I believe it was already well developed, obviously open to any refinements. So I think this verbiage was the board members and Dan Jacobson, I believe someone else trying to piece it together. I believe the action word was ensure. I forgot the rest of the wording, but it was slightly different. It was a little bit more polished. But we can take your notes. You mentioned something about diversity. I think that wasn't part of it, but Deidre, we can include your notes here for me. So if Sarah under or next to placeholder consideration of accessibility limitations, we can put some notes in there. Or if you prefer, we can have another objective that specifically addresses addresses diversity in a little bit more broader terms. Does that answer your question, Deidre?
Not sure that it does, but I appreciate the effort, and it doesn't mean anything. It has nothing to do with you. It's more to do with me. It's all about me in this instance. But when we said to enhance diversity and inclusion as to the why, it made me stop to think about it. There's no way of, sometimes, let me just say it this way. Sometimes people like to use the words DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because those are buzzwords to be used. But when you place them with things to enhance, but don't talk about how to enhance, or when you use the words beware, and I'm not saying that's the language that was proposed. I understand what happened as far as that's concerned. But I'm wondering if that same sentiment, because it resonated with me when we went on break, that in every area of our strategic plan, are we using that more or less as somewhat of a mantra to when we're making decisions and actionable actionable tasks that need to be done as far as this board is concerned? Because it's one thing to use a buzzword and throw that in there. It's another thing to make it happen. And so I'm asking the question of my board members, of executive leadership. I just want to understand where we are at this point, because it has been a long time since November, and other things are muddling my mind. So if you can help me to stay clear and focused on the task at hand, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Deidre. I do see Katrina's hand is up, and then any additional staff or CBA staff, leadership, and board members who would like to respond to Deidre's questions or comments. But go ahead, Katrina. You have
So, Deidre, maybe a practical translation of your comment, which makes a lot of sense. I remembered over the break that one of our accidentally deleted or not carried over to the current presentation items under technology was a multi-year technology plan. And so we could incorporate into our expectations from staff that they address within the document how diversity inclusion is being done, because it did come up, at least within emerging technologies, that we don't want to exclude anyone. I think Patty, in terms of how they access it for accessibility, I think Patty addressed it, but it would be great to your point, actually identify how our plan as written considers that, so that as a board we can understand, question, and track it. So I don't know if that needs to be actually written into the multi-year plan, but I think my ask for staff would be that it be incorporated. So I don't know if that is helpful, but I don't disagree. We should maybe, when we're done, go back and look at it and say, is there a way to modify any of our comments to accommodate our expectation that each area is evaluated for action items?
I totally agree with you, Katrina, and Dan. You are eloquent in presentation and verbiage, and so what she said, ditto. It's my response. What she just said, yes, you did that. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you, Deidre. And Patty, your hand is up, and I'll get to you in just a second. I was going to make a comment that we heard the other objective for EAT emerging technology was a multi-tech plan, so we put a placeholder here so when we recover it. A second comment that I was going to make was the nice thing about the goal area of organizational effectiveness, it's one that can really touch all of your other goal areas. So in looking at the organizational effectiveness, that objective that we were in the process of moving, the accessibility objective, or the consideration of accessibility limitations, it represents an objective that it has a potential of touching all of your goal areas. So if you would like the other board members, and my question would be for Deidre and everyone else, if you would like to have a specific objective that talks about diversity and inclusion and be more or request that be in the decision process of all of your other goal areas, that's where I would recommend placing it, is in the organizational effectiveness. The way that and this is only from my view, it does seem that it's a separate, it's separate from accessibility, the accessibility limitations. Patty, please go ahead.
Comment, and if it is acceptable to the members, we can certainly explore this offline and see how best to incorporate it into the strategic plan. And then when we bring the plan back for approval and adoption by the board, you would have an opportunity to further address this or make any changes at that time, if that's helpful.
I like that comment. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you. So we're still in the goal area of emerging technologies. We have 2 placeholders. Any additional objectives? And Dee Dee, I did see your hand was up.
No, actually, Patty addressed my comment. I think it's great that Deidre's comment was very pointed and timely. I think that going back and taking a look at this throughout our plan is wonderful.
Thank you. Any additional objectives besides the 2 that were already developed for emerging technologies? And if not, we will move on to the next goal and the last goal area, which is organizational effectiveness. Yeah, okay. Oh, actually, I backtrack. I apologize. Emerging technologies, if we can go back, Sarah, thank you. And board president, I'm going to ask you if you would like to open up for public comment on the goal area of emerging technologies.
I'd just like to make one further comment to Deidre and everybody else, is if you look at the strategic plan for 2019 through 2021, on page 3, we talk about mission, vision, and values. This could be something that's added as a value under the other areas to open up when they first see the plan, what we're all about. And I think this would be a good inclusion in that area. With that being said, please open it up to public comment.
Thank you, board president. Members of the public, the Q&A is now open. If you would like to participate in public comment, please click on the question mark inside of the square, which is located typically at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. And in the text field, type "I would like to make a comment" and send it to all panelists. Again, this public comment is for the goal area of emerging technologies, the objectives that were developed, and the placeholders that are there, which is the objectives that were accidentally lost, but will be recovered. Board President, I see no request for public comments. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So moving back to the plan, the strategic plan, we're moving on to organizational effectiveness. I will give you a couple minutes to review the summary on pages 71 through 72 of your environmental scan and the recommended objectives on page 78. And then we'll come back and we'll gather your contributions. Okay, so we'll get started here. We'll move on to the next slide, where we already have a placeholder, which is a consideration of accessibility limitations. There was an attempt to recreate that objective here as well, so that's part of that placeholder. Any of the board members have any additional objectives for the goal area of organizational effectiveness? And if you do, please feel free to raise your hand. If I don't catch your hand being raised, feel free to unmute yourself. And Deidre, your hand is up.
I just had a question in regards to 78, item number 4, where we discussed in-person meetings and getting back to in-person meetings where collaboration and adjudication can be more effective than virtual. Would that need to be modified based on the earlier conversations addressed today?
And you were speaking in regards to a recommended objective, correct?
Correct. I'm speaking in regards to conversation that we had in a subcommittee meeting for those that may have been present, but certainly those that are a part of the legislative committee were present, where we raised concern about virtual meetings. And I believe that member Carrie Ann Farrell Hines led that conversation. So in looking at this summary, I wanted to make sure that we were in alignment if there had been any changes in feelings in regards to the matter on page 78.
Thank you. Board members, do you feel that should be an objective under organizational effectiveness, and whether it should be refined based on the conversations in today's committee meeting? Thank you, Deidre. And Dee Dee?
Just to continue the conversation, I think it's important for us to get together again and to be in person, and for committee meetings to be in person. I just don't know if it's something that we can actually influence and control. So that would be my only hesitation of including it as an objective in our strategic plan.
Thank you, Dee Dee. And Deidre, your hand is up.
Trying desperately to lower it. So no, but thank you for asking.
Oh, thank you. Carrie Ann, your hand is up.
Our conversation earlier today impacts this objective, because the strategic plan is looking at, I believe, the next 3 years. And one of the things we were talking about earlier today, well, we were talking about two things. One was sort of the short-term, issue, regarding the pandemic, which unfortunately is not so short-term, but we're optimistic that this is coming to an end. I don't want to jinx us. But the second part of that was really more so about committees, not so much about the full board. So it was about extending the flexibility of the meeting formats for the committees. It wasn't to necessarily limit the full board's meeting in person. So the conversation earlier today didn't have as much relevance to this strategic plan, I think, unless we wanted to include in the strategic plan, something about encouraging the flexible meeting requirements for those committees that allow for participation by members who are not appointed to the full board of accountancy, but they're only appointed to the committees, because that seems to be the place where we run into issues, with recruitment and attendance. And I think that the recommendations that we're making to revise the rules and regulations is really intended to affect them more so than our full board.
Thank you. And I see the Y was for the recruitment, and was it accessibility? Or?
I was recommending for the recruitment and retention, really, recruitment and retention of committee members.
Thank you. And Nancy, I did see your hand is up. I apologize. It took me a while to come back. And Nancy, did you have a comment?
No, I mean, I was just going to say, I too believe that it's difficult to have something on here that is the powers that be kind of dictate, whether it will be virtual or not. I just don't think that should be on here. I was agreeing with what Ms. Owens said earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Katrina, your hand is up.
If maybe a friendly amendment is an option here. I think the flexible meeting requirements for the committees is also to minimize quorum issues, because the fact that we have people who cannot attend live is actually impeding the ability at some point of our committees of meetings. So I just wanted to throw in, someone else may have a much better way to word it, but it's recruitment, retention, and minimizing quorum issues.
Thank you, Katrina. So what we have here is encourage flexible meeting requirements for the committees for recruitment, retention, and minimize quorum issues. Carrie Ann, I see your hand is up.
For that, I would just say it's really about recruitment, retention, and sort of it's more about sort of the smooth operation of the committee. I mean, a quorum issue is one of many issues that can impact the ability of the committee to be effective and to operate smoothly. So I would take out like quorum and use some other phrase that is really about the where we're in this section, the organizational effectiveness, or the effectiveness and operation of the committee as a whole, as opposed to just, because it can cover a number of things. It could later cover issues like, agenda planning or, whatever, but it's really about us making sure that the meeting requirements, facilitate smooth committee operation, smooth committee operations.
Thank you. So what we captured here was for recruitment, retention, and instead of having minimized quorum issues with committee members, we would remove all of that and just finish off with to increase effectiveness of committee or of committee operations.
Yeah, I'd say operational effectiveness.
Okay, and to increase operational effectiveness. Thank you, Katrina.
I like those suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any feedback from any of the board members regarding this objective? Any refinements, amendments? How about any additional objectives? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Katrina.
Oh, I have a new one. It's an oldie but goodie. I would suggest we consider a repeat of one from our prior plan, because I'm thinking it may still be appropriate, and that is to analyze and identify professional development and training opportunities for staff to preserve institutional knowledge and retention. So I, of course, have to defer to Patty and the team to see if that still makes sense, but it feels appropriate. So I would ask for your input.
Thank you, Katrina. Patty, your hand is up.
Apply and be appropriate to include.
Thank you, Patty. So we captured the objective here. Any additional refinements or amendments, feedback from any of the other board members? No? Are there any additional objectives that any of you would like to add to the organizational effectiveness goal area? Deidre, your hand's up.
this is very minor, but we're under the why to preserve institutional knowledge is very important, but I always look at it as intellectual capital. And it's beyond just knowledge, but the intellectual capital, the why, the how, the when, the history, and more importantly, the intent of the board in its decision making. So just a recommendation. I'm not married to either.
Thank you. And I did see some support. Any refinements or amendments to that? Or no? Okay. Any additional objectives under organizational effectiveness? Again, if I don't see your hand, if you can't raise your hand virtually, feel free to unmute your microphone, please. Okay, so let's go back and see how many objectives we have. We have one being placed hold, and then the encourage flexible meetings, that's 2. And then 3. So we have 3 objectives under organizational effectiveness. And Board President, would you like me to open up for public comment? Thank you. So members of the public, we are now open. The Q&A is now open for public comment. If you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of a square, typically located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. And in the text field, type, I would like to make a comment, and send it to all panelists. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. And again, the public comment is for the goal area of organizational effectiveness and the objectives that were drafted. Board President, no requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So going back, we covered all, or you all finished drafting objectives for all of the goal areas. And now we're going to look at the total number of objectives that were developed. So 5, 4, 4, 6, 4, 2, thank you, Sarah. 28 objectives that you have for the strategic plan of 2022 through 2024. Any questions, any comments from any of the board members or CBA, staff, and leadership? No? We'll move on to the next steps here, which Solid will put together the draft of the strategic plan. We will go back and look at the recording, make sure we accurately capture the 3 objectives that were accidentally lost there, but they are again saved in the recording. So we will put that together. We will then send it to CBA leadership for review, possible edits and approval. And moving forward, the next board meeting, it will be provided to the board members for their review, refinement, and approval. So I do have 2 hands. First, we'll go with Katrina.
Thank you. I wanted to express support for President Savoy's comment about the inclusion of the addition of diversity and inclusion, or some similar language under values. So I just would like to ask that that be included at some point in the draft as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Will do. And Sochi, your hand is up.
Sorry, took the words out of my mouth. I echo and support that feedback. So thank you, President, for bringing that up.
Thank you. And Dan Jacobson, your hand is up.
I too agree that it should, that such should be in values, but I don't think it should be deleted from the other portion where we had said it, because I think it's important to emphasize that it's not only a value, it's an operational thing that we actually do.
Thank you. And yes, I will, the objective, again, after it's recovered, I will make sure that it's included in under the organizational effectiveness. And thank you, Sarah, also added some notes there underneath the PowerPoint slide to make sure we don't miss these reminders. Thank you so much. Any additional comments, reminders, questions? Okay, well, Board President, you may proceed. Would it be lunch or?
Very much. We really appreciate your doing this for us. I think once we get on a roll, it starts happening more easily. So at this point, I like to break for lunch. We have a time certain at 1:30. I'd ask everybody to please log on a few minutes earlier so we can take care of all the administrative things and try to get started promptly at 1:30, as we have a full agenda the rest of today and all of tomorrow. So thank you all, and see you shortly.